CNN.
Well, when the fighting begins, perhaps the biggest fear, the greatest unknown, chemical and biological weapons. CNN's Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr has the very latest on that. Barbara?
Well, Anderson, Pentagon officials and officials here in Washington now say there is recent and fresh evidence that Iraq is preparing to use chemical weapons, either against U.S. troops or possibly its own citizens. Officials here in Washington telling CNN that they have some intelligence information that leads them to believe that chemical munitions have now been distributed to some Republican Guard units south of Baghdad. And of course, it is believed the Republican Guard will make the last stand to defend the capital if there is war. There's also some concern about some artillery pieces that have been placed down near the Kuwaiti border. These artillery pieces possibly capable of also firing chemical munitions. Anderson, here's the issue at hand. U.S. officials say there has been what they call increased chatter, information that they have heard in recent days they believe is credible, that the Iraqi military is making these preparations. But whether or not the Iraqi line units, the soldiers out there, would actually fire these chemical weapons, of course, is an open question. And officials emphasize no U.S. intelligence or military personnel has actually put their eyeballs on these chemical munitions. Not at all clear exactly where they are, but they do believe now that they have credible intelligence that some of these chemical munitions have now been distributed to some Iraqi military units. Anderson?
Barbara, no doubt you have heard there's some people who view this with some skepticism and say, well, this seems awfully convenient that we suddenly have this information now. Is there any way to know for sure whether or not this is true?
Well, of course, what officials here and officials in Washington say this morning is they have heard what they call chatter. Absolutely. What they cannot tell us for sure is whether or not the Iraqis may be putting these messages out there in their own psychological warfare operation against the United States military, against the Pentagon. But officials say they have always believed that Saddam Hussein has these chemical weapons and that he would make some attempt to possibly put them out there with their military forces. What the Pentagon has been focusing on for the last several weeks is a psychological operation of its own, trying to convince the Iraqi rank and file in the military not to follow any orders to use chemical weapons or weapons of mass destruction, that would constitute a war crime. But I have to tell you, Rumor Central is very, very active here at the Pentagon this morning. We have learned they are also checking out another report, they tell us. They cannot confirm, but there are reports that possibly some pipelines have actually been broken in the southern oil fields. They don't know, very strongly emphasizing they don't know if it's some industrial accident or some sabotage, but it's also information they say has come to them, and now they are trying to check it out. Anderson?
All right, interesting stuff. CNN's Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr, appreciate it. So what can we expect in the coming days? With some insight now into U.S. war plans, we're joined by CNN military analyst and retired Army Brigadier General David Grange. Now, just so you know, during his 30 years in the military, he served as a Ranger and a Green Beret, saw service from Vietnam to the 1991 Gulf War. General Grange, thanks for being with us. What should we be looking for in the region on the ground in the next couple of days?
Well, final preparations for any kind of war plan that may come their way. It's going to change. Planning always changes depending on the enemy situation. Very similar to what you just talked to Barbara about. If there's indications that chemicals may be used, there'll be additional plans made to take care of that. Because even if it's a rumor, even if it's disinformation, the troops in the region have to plan as if it may happen, just to protect the force. And then you're going to have a reshuffling of organizations in the region or new forces coming into the region that haven't arrived yet, positioned throughout the theater of operations. So that's what you'll be seeing in the next few days, I think.
Are U.S. troops ready to go?
U.S. troops, I believe, are ready to go. A commander in a situation like this, and it's the same for the British command as well, because you're responsible for the lives of your troopers, you never feel that you've done everything you can. You never feel you're 100%. There's always something that you learn about, that cause you to think, gee, I got to get ready for that. I got to tweak this training a little bit. I need to get this other little piece of equipment. And it goes on and on and on. And it should go on like that. That's the way you should feel, because the commanders have that moral responsibility to have their troops ready to go, regardless of the time they're asked to go or the type of fight they're going to be put in.
You know, it's not often in news that we talk about the phases of the moon, but that's something military commanders may be looking at very closely. I understand April 1st, so you're seeing a graphic right there. It's a dark moon, as they call it, complete darkness. April 25th is the half moon, looking like a full moon, April 16th. What kind of import does this have?
Well, this is part of the equation. If you back off from a little bit before April 1st, I think the moon starts to wane around the 27th, 28th of March.
Yeah, in fact, I believe it's a full moon tomorrow, March 18th, but that's just from memory.
I believe so. And so the coalition forces, because of the advantages they have of night vision technology and the ability to train and fight at night, would rather go at night because it negates some of the optical guided munitions that the Iraqis would rely on. When they use radar, when they can't see, that lights up their systems, and U.S. and Brit forces can take them out. So U.S. forces want to go in the dark, but it's not a requirement, but it helps.
And it's also, you want darkness, but you want a little bit of light because that optical equipment works off a little bit of moonlight, is my understanding, right?
Yeah, or starlight. A little bit of ambient light will help, of course, but you'd rather have it more on the dark side than the light side.
All right. It's often said U.S. military owns the night. For their sake, let's hope it's true. General David Grange, appreciate you joining us right now. We've got a little bit of developing information, and for that, we're going to go to Richard Roth live at the United Nations. Richard, what do you have?
Anderson, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, we're told by a diplomat, has made the decision to withdraw the weapons inspectors from Iraq. He has told the Security Council this in closed-door meetings, which continue at this moment. Earlier in the morning, Annan met with Hans Blix, the chief weapons inspector. A spokesman for Blix's inspectors inside Iraq said they believe they will start evacuating on Tuesday. We are told by a diplomat that Annan did not give a specific time window, but it is generally believed that it might be in the 24-hour window. Earlier, the International Atomic Energy Agency said they too had gotten the word from a U.S. administration official who is advising both sets of inspectors that it would be best to leave. Anderson.
Richard, there had been talk the last couple of days, possibly Hans Blix making a last-minute trip to Baghdad. That would seem to be a no-go at this point. Is that correct?
It would seem to be impossible for him and al-Baradei to go in while his weapons inspectors are coming out at this point. That trip looks like a no-go.
All right. Richard Roth live at the UN. Thanks. Swift international reaction and fallout to today's events. Excuse me. We're going to take you live to London, Moscow, and Paris when we return.
Afterwards in Spanish, yes, sir.
Are we coming to the end of the road?
Excuse me, behind.
Is the UN as we've known it for decades dead now?
As the Secretary General himself mentioned, and he mentioned to us in the Council chambers this morning, he will be directing a letter to the President of the Council regarding some of the issues and tasks that he thinks will need to be addressed in the event of conflict. No, there's a lot of work that is ongoing and that will have to be done. And there are examples from the past where the Council was not able to reach agreement in a particular conflictive situation or another, such as in the case of Kosovo, but went on to carry out very important responsibilities. So I guess the answer to your question would be no. Yes, sir.
But President Bush has presented it as a test for the Security Council. Would you say the Security Council has failed
it was
that
a test, and it's most regrettable, as we said earlier, that in light of the explicit decision of one country to exercise its veto, it was not possible to move this resolution forward. Yes, sir.
Hours or days for Iraq to make the strategic decision to disarm, to avoid a war?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that further. Obviously, time is virtually run out. I think the time for diplomatic activity is literally exhausted, but the President will address our nation tonight at 8 p.m., so I think I'd prefer to wait to hear what he has to say on that subject. Yes, sir. So right here.
Some of your allies in the Gulf, in the Middle East, they requested or they demanded a resolution from the United Nations for them to join in any campaign. How are you going to explain that to them?
Well, again, as we said, it's regrettable that a resolution has not been passed. But as Secretary Powell said this morning, we believe that at least as far as we're concerned, there's ample authority under resolutions 678, 687, and all the way through to 1441 for whatever future course of action might be contemplated. And I think that we might find that a number of countries agree with us on that point. Una pregunta en español. Sí, no. This will be the last question en español.
Acorde a lo que acaban de decir el embajador francés y también el secretario Kofi Annan, sería ilegítimo tomar acción militar sin el consenso general y que la mayoría del Consejo.
Richard Roth standing by. Richard, what are you hearing out of these press conferences?
Well, Anderson, you're seeing again U.S. and U.K. diplomats there putting the blame on France. The belief is that Russia would never have vetoed if France was not going to veto. The French are furious here at the United Nations for being singled out because they say they weren't alone in opposing this resolution. It was a war authorization, they complain, and that 11 other members of the Council were not in favor of this. Secretary General Annan virtually saying he believes the U.S. military action, if it comes, would be against international law. He said this in a press conference in The Hague last week. Didn't come as close this time to saying it, but that's what he believes. The United States still leaving some glimmer of a diplomatic window, even though Secretary Powell said it's all but gone, by saying that the resolution is still on the table. Ambassador Greenstock of Britain saying it's wrong for people to report that the resolution was withdrawn. He says it's still there, but he didn't want to give any timeline for how long it'll be there. That resolution had a date, as Secretary Powell said, that was going to die anyway. Here is Ambassador Pleuger of Germany.
We have heard this morning that the co-sponsors have said that they would not submit the draft resolution to the vote for whatever reasons, but I think this gives the Council an opportunity to make a last-ditch effort to find a common approach to our common goal of disarmament of Iraq. We have reiterated on the lines of the common declaration of the three foreign ministers of Germany, France, and Russia that has been distributed yesterday as a Council document, that we share the goal, the common goal of the international community to disarm Iraq. And we don't see at present any circumstances to break off the inspection process, especially at the time when the inspection process yields results. And as you know, France, Germany, and the Russian Federation have made proposals how to strengthen these inspections, and therefore we don't see any reason to stop that program now. Now, another good information we got this morning was that Dr. Blix is ready to give us his program of work this afternoon. So maybe that we will have a final chance to come to a consensus in the Council, because what was in the draft resolution of the co-sponsors, 5 benchmarks that would have to be fulfilled, is not so completely different from the report of the or from the work program of the inspectors, because there they have put together 12 key remaining disarmament tasks. And these are very similar to the benchmarks in the draft resolution. So we will do everything to make an effort to come to a common conclusion how to avert military action at the last minute and find a way to achieve our common goal, the peaceful disarmament of Iraq. Thank you.
Are you going ahead with your ministerial meeting idea?
This proposal has been made in the declaration of the 3 ministers, and the question is now, of course, how the other members of the Council will react to that, and in what time frame we can achieve this. It could be done tomorrow, but on the other hand, tomorrow the presidency has scheduled a meeting on West Africa and the problem of small weapons. So the meeting could take place on Wednesday morning.
Isn't this rather unrealistic? The Secretary General is pulling the inspectors out. You're talking about a program of work, meetings on West Africa. Isn't this Alice in Wonderland?
Well, well, you see, the Chinese ambassador once said, if you have 1% chance of keeping the peace, you should make 100% effort to achieve this. And I think that is what we are doing now. We are not resignating, and if we are not successful, we will at least be able to tell us and you that we have worked to the last minute to find a consensus in the Council and a peaceful solution to the disarmament of Iraq.
Was it the Council who allowed the withdrawal or relocation of the inspectors, or was it this General Secretary just told you that we are moving them out,
to find a consensus in the Council and a peaceful solution to the disarmament of Iraq.
Was it the Council who allowed the withdrawal or relocation of the inspectors, or was it this General Secretary just told you that we are moving them out, relocating temporarily?
Yes.
Was it your wish that they be withdrawn?
No, it is a responsibility of the Secretary General to take care of the safety and security of all UN personnel on mission. And it is a decision of